Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today for the Designscape talk on sustainability. And I am very happy to be joined by our esteemed panel, who will all introduce themselves to you. So first of all, we have Georgia.
Hi, thank you for asking me to join you. So my name's Georgia Elliott Smith. I'm the Managing Director of Element 4. We are sustainability consultants and wellbeing consultants in the built environment. So all things groovy and green and healthy and happy for buildings.
And we have Jennifer as well today.
Hi, I'm also very grateful to be a part of the panel. I'm Jennifer Manners, and I have a small business where we do bespoke rugs. And I think it's become a lot more sustainably focused when we have just recently launched a sustainable collection of recycled plastic rugs.
And we have Nicola and Nicola.
Hi, yeah, thank you. It's great to be here and part of the discussion. I'm Nicola Keenan.
I'm Nicola Lindsell, and we co-run Boxx Creative. We're an interiors and branding studio based in London, and we work with amazing clients who are sort of in the hospitality, workspace and residential areas.
And our design philosophy is consciously creating. So it's very much a holistic approach to the spaces, experience and products that we design, which looks at the environmental, the social, community and ethical side and well-being of all the spaces we create to ensure they're both good for people and good for the planet.
Fantastic, thank you. And finally, I'm Samantha Scott Jeffries. I'm the editor of the English Home magazine. So let's get started. I think the best place to start is to try and demystify a little bit for our listeners today the pillars of responsible, sustainable design. So Georgia, I thought it might be nice for you to kick off and talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so we work with clients on projects or on corporate sustainability. So we look at a macro level as businesses, but also looking at more of a micro level on a project or on a particular product as well sometimes. And what it's really important to do, I think, in sustainability is to think really holistically about your business or the system, the project, whatever it is. So the true meaning of sustainability is that it's a balance between environmental, social and economic factors. And the problem that we normally have in business is we're way too far in the economic corner. And the reason that we get ourselves into trouble with things like climate change and social degradation is because we're not thinking enough about those factors and we're way out of balance. So it's really important when you're developing a good sustainability strategy to make sure that you're thinking holistically about those three things. And quite commonly, what people forget about sustainability as well is that the economic side is also really important. But no one of those three things is more important than the other. So we don't want to see something that's environmentally fabulous but hugely expensive, because that equally is not sustainable if it's economically unviable. So we want to get all of these things in balance and bring social and environmental issues much more to the forefront and balance them with economic requirements, which I think these days, given a really great awareness that's coming up in the public, and certainly through all kinds of campaigns by the UN and the wonderful Greta Thunberg and all kinds of fabulous influences around the world, people are just getting much more aware of those things and bringing them up in business terms.
Mm. And how do you commonly work with architects and interior designers, Georgia?
So we frequently are brought in by the client right at the beginning of a project, where we know the client might have worked on a previous project, or they have some reason why they're needing to think more about sustainability. And actually, currently we're getting lots of clients inquiring with us because certainly with the pandemic, there's been much more of a push for clients to think about responsible business and think more about issues beyond the immediate economic into really taking care of society, really thinking about biodiversity and ethical supply chains and much wider impact. So we get brought in usually by a client. We will then work within the design team. We'll oversee the design process, we'll set targets, we create a sustainability strategy for a project, and we use a number of different benchmarks and strategies broadly aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, using tools like the REBA Sustainable Outcomes, which is a brilliant, brilliant tool. If anybody listening to this hasn't seen it, highly, highly recommend it because it gives some great benchmarks. And then look into all the different aspects and just use those holistic tools to think about things in a really wide sense, not just looking at carbon, which is where people tend to go. It's just like, oh, carbon footprinting straight away.
Yes, sure. And Nicola, or shall I call you Boxx as an overall thing? Boxx ladies. Obviously, you work a lot in residential design projects, and you mentioned that your kind of ethos is being consciously creative and linking that to well-being and sustainability. So I just wondered if you could sort of jump in here and tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, obviously we use the 3 pillars, but that tends to appeal more to our corporate customers, particularly because they have their corporate social responsibility. But with our residential customers, each project's very different. It could vary from a new build, working with a property developer, to a simple refurb. So we really work with each customer to understand what their goals are and what they want to achieve. And we have a framework that we then adjust accordingly depending on the brief and the needs of the project. So typically one of the biggest things we focus on, particularly if there's like a strip out to start with, is waste. And for us, that's one of the biggest sort of the big wins that can be achieved. So we look at all the materials that are essentially having to be replaced and looking at actually what could be retained, what could be reused, how could they be repurposed, and then kind of like last in line, actually, if it has to be recycled, let's make sure it is recycled rather than, you know, trying to avoid waste and landfill and incineration.
Sure. And how do you suggest organisations start to navigate what the most important issues are in sustainability, for them to think about how to build a framework or a strategy when you work with them?
For us, it's all about sort of getting everyone to ask the right questions. And I think a lot of people now are becoming aware of the sort of social and environmental implications that they have when they're designing space. And so we always sort of start by asking our supplier, you know, where is that wood sourced from? Who's made it? What are your CSR things in your company? And so, yeah, so it's keep asking until they actually come up with the answer, and they need to go up and do their research too.
I think that's so important. I find that as well. So like, ask the questions, you know, and you find that so many people don't do that and don't go into the supply chain and really ask and try to understand. And a huge amount of what I do as well is demystifying sustainability, because I think people sometimes feel like you need to have a degree in it to understand it, when really it's about, you know, I just want people to feel like this is about life. It's about what goes on all around us. It's about having a clean place to live and a clean planet. You know, that's something that affects all of us. So get interested, you know, and what are the topics that really interest you and get you excited? Start asking your supply chain about those things, and don't just be brushed away with greenwash. You know, really interrogate and ask for evidence as well.
Absolutely. And Nicola's, how do you work with product designers? You know, we're talking about the supply chain, and I wondered how you work with bespoke supplies in your projects in particular.
Yeah, so the great thing is when we're working with something that's bespoke made, we've really got the opportunity to have more of a positive impact here. Look at not only is how it's designed, but look at it from actually what materials are used, all the sorts of varnishes and paints and any sort of finishes in, so as Nicola was saying, so like low VOCs, for example, is always an important one. Can we use water-based instead of solvent-based and things like this? So we're not only looking at the environmental perspective, but also the well-being of the people actually who are the makers and those that are then going to be occupying and living in the space and actually using that piece of furniture. Looking at the sort of circular economy side, when we're looking at the furniture that we're designing that's being made, it's then what happens at the end of its life? Could it be reupholstered? Could it be reused? Can it be broken down to be repurposed? So we really do consider that, and then it's finding the right suppliers to actually who share the same ethos, who can make all that possible. And I think one of the things we're very excited about right now in the UK, there are so many terrific makers that are doing great things and manufacturers. So it's a really good time to be involved.
And obviously we're joined by one here. So Jennifer, this is interesting to come to you at this point, I think, as a bespoke supplier of rugs. Tell me about your approach to what you do.
Do you know, I think it's interesting because when I started getting into rugs and came at it from an interior design background, the idea was that I felt it was important to make a rug well and to make it once and to have it timeless and to have it last. There's a lot with rugs. There are a lot of rugs out there that are poorly made. It's actually rugs and carpets from hotels around the world, the tufted rugs where they use a lot of the glue. They're the second biggest contributors to landfills globally, and I was really shocked to find out about that. A lot, we've kind of, you know, on the back of a throwaway fashion culture, I think interiors have had been heading to that direction, and I think that we're now kind of riding the wave, hopefully back towards a more sustainable approach. So I think rugs, bespoke rugs, made well, made in a timeless manner, have been it's a sustainable way of doing flooring that should last for generations, whether you're using wool or natural silk. However, of course, being able to come up with a solution for a massive problem, and that is by using recycled plastic, you know, the benefits of it were very clear to us. One of my best friends who's vegan, we were out shopping and saw one of these recycled plastic throws, and we thought, oh, fantastic, give us 5, let's go crazy. And then I asked her a couple of months later, how was that throw that you bought? And she said, you know what, I ended up taking it back because I felt like I was watching television at night with a plastic bag wrapped around me. And I thought, interesting. And then about 2 months later, I went to India where they showed me some products made with recycled plastic. Now, you know, bespoke rugs are kind of at the higher end luxury side of the market. And so I said, love it, love it, love it, love it, but we've got to make it a luxury item. And with that, doing a permanent construction. So keeping them hand knotted, keeping them handmade and flat woven, and understanding kind of the provenance of that and the whole story that goes with it. Now, of course, I know I'm talking so much, but of course, initially, having been a journalist prior to getting into interiors, I thought, I know, great story, but when you start digging around, what you'll find out is that recycling plastic is worse for the environment than actually reusing the plastic. So first thing I did was kind of deep dive into the recycling plastic world, which is a very, very deep dive indeed, because it is vast and it is very political as well. And was very pleased to discover that if it's done in a proper factory, which they do have for recycling plastic, but it is actually able to reuse the water used. Plastic is recycled by pressure and water and slicing it down, and that's kind of basically what it is. So when it's done in a controlled environment, they can actually do it in a very safe way. Of course, there are lots of communities and countries that are doing it in really unsafe ways. So I think hopefully by creating a little bit of a market, I don't know if Jennifer Manners Rugs is going to create an entire market for recycled plastic, but I think it's a step, and I think it's creating an awareness is the initial step.
Yeah, and also I think it's very interesting to ask you a little bit more about that, and obviously we'll have designers listening hopefully today, and I think it might be interesting to find out about the process of working with ethical craftsmen in other countries in order to preserve those you know, time-honored techniques and also bring in new materials. You know, how did you ensure that all of the labor and the conditions are ethical and sustainable as well?
Well, there are some amazing organizations set up to do exactly that, Good Weave and Care and Fair and all, and that's amazing. However, I think even with under that umbrella, it's just important. I mean, I go out at least twice a year, obviously curtailed at the moment, but and I think it's with all these things, it's creating a very personal relationship. On our Instagram, we're constantly highlighting every single individual who makes our rugs, down to the guy whose sole job is to take the rug from the weaving center to being washed, and he cycles them there, and I think he should be celebrated also. And so it's actually having a very personal relationship with everybody, not just the lovely main guy we speak to on a daily multi-time basis. So I think there's no substitute for that. It's wonderful to have these organizations that help, and they're vital, particularly when in places like Nepal, a lot of the weaving happens in very remote areas. And so they've got to be able to check that working standards are kept, and obviously no child labor and those kind of things. But it is even beyond that. It's the materials being used, and asking when you're there, let's have a look at it, let me see it. And if there's a reluctance, then the alarm bell goes off, there's an issue. So we have switched suppliers several times. However, our current supplier, which is how we develop the recycled plastic, which we call repurpose. I love Nicola's used the word twice already. It is, we've been with them for a long time and have a very, it's a close relationship. I stay with the family.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that I don't think there's a substitute for that. And beyond rugs, we are involved in the village, and I think that out of interest, out of just a personal interest, I think having come from news and journalism, it just makes the whole job more satisfying. Yeah, I believe.
Can I say on that as well? I think that is a really interesting, so that process itself, what you say about there's no substitute for really getting to know that process. I think that's the same for all of sustainability as well, on a wider scale, because I think so many of the problems that I come up against with clients is that they want a shortcut. And that's where greenwash is allowed to flourish, because people just want a shortcut to an easy answer, to tick a box and it's done. And it's really, for me, it's really crucial that this stuff is taken to heart, and that people do this because they mean it, and they do it because they want to, and they care about it, and they see the value in it. And in that sense, there is no substitute for educating yourself about the key issues in your industry, and about what the key things are you need to look out for, and also how to spot greenwash, because you will get it over and over again. And if you want to get a truly sustainable product at the end of the day, you need to be aware of those things and not just be falling down all the time on tick boxes and quick certifications and things like this. You need to really get under the skin and stick with those things that to be good.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And Nicola's, how do you help your suppliers become more sustainable, or how do you encourage them to become more sustainable?
Good question. So I think what we did initially, when we realised that it was both in alignment with our values and the direction we really wanted to take Boxx in and attract projects and clients that were aligned with our values of sustainability, we met with all of our supply chain to really ask them lots and lots of questions to really understand how their products or materials were actually made. And it was literally the who, the what, the why, the when, the how, and really got to the bottom. And not everyone could answer everything, so they'd go away and come back. And it was really just that sort of natural organic process of us learning, and the more questions we asked, you realise you open a can of worms and you suddenly delve in, you realise how deep one particular topic is. But it was a really good process. It helped us learn and research. And then consequently, a lot of suppliers, if they didn't know, they were really interested to find out more. And we discovered a lot of suppliers, for example, were already being sustainable. They just didn't actively market and tell people. So for example, some fabric companies use what's called regen wool, which means it's essentially recycled wool. But previously, people thought that was dirty. They didn't want recycled materials. They wanted brand new products because they associated that with being better. So suppliers were actually being sustainable, but didn't tell everyone. It was kind of done in covert, in a secret way. But now obviously there's a demand for it. So they're now kind of actually promoting this, and it's such a positive thing. And then other companies that are already being really sustainable are really excited when you ask these questions, because they've got their, you know, their environmental policies, sustainability policies, and they're really happy to talk, and they're really excited. And we've visited lots of our suppliers, going up to visit Chimera Fabrics, for example, in Yorkshire. We visited Fresso in Birmingham, really just understand the process of how they're making the material. And I think that's such an important thing to actually really understand and see it and experience it in real life. But yeah, what we found is increasingly, we were told you're the only one asking, and now they're getting 2 or 3 inquiries a week of people asking. So it's great that it's like this trickle down effect, and more people are demanding it. And I think we've also given them little tips and tricks and said, you know, we want to send our fabrics back to you. Is there any way we can do this? And, you know, we'll explain that maybe they could offer like an envelope service, a return envelope, and we can post them back. So they've been really open to change. And we've actually had a lot of suppliers come to us and say, how could we be more sustainable? Or we want to create a sustainable fabric range. Could we run it by you and get your thoughts and ideas? And so that's been really nice to kind of work with them in that sort of consultative way.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. So Georgia, you know, how can other brands and designers make a phase shift to a more sustainable practice? What would you recommend?
So the way we always start is by looking at impact. So you start quite wide and you take a look at the whole business or the product chain, and you just take a really good look at where are all of your impacts. And there are key topics, you know, like waste and the product that you're buying and ethics within the supply chain. Start very wide. Once you've got that information, you can then start to make decisions about how you prioritize those things. And I always recommend with my clients that you don't try and hit everything at once. You have to take the things that have the largest impact, you know, on the environment, but then a number of the things that are really important to you and your DNA as a business, which might not necessarily have the biggest impact, but they might be the things that you can make the biggest impact in because you're passionate about it. And so I always think that if you feel, if your staff and you yourself have an emotional connection to the thing that you're trying to change, you're always going to do so much better with it than trying to get people to reduce the embodied carbon, you know, which is just a number at the end of the day and very difficult to get hold of unless you've got a really personal story around that makes you feel passionate about it. So take the biggest impact issues, you know, a few of those, and then some of the things that you feel you can make a real difference in and that give you a great story and something that you can get up, you know, get home from work in the evening and feel really good about having made a difference in. And you know, measure and monitor. I'm all about this, and share the journey. You know, one of the most toxic things I think in the world of sustainable business is greenwash and trying to make everything seem perfect. And I'm so against that. I really want to hear about people's story, hear about the journey. And I love it when I hear people come to me saying, we're not perfect. You know, we know we're not doing great on this, but we know it's an area of weakness and we're going to be addressing it over the next year or two. But this is the thing that we love, we're great at, we're nailing it, you know, and we're going to keep improving on that. And I think only in that way can we all start giving each other a break, because nobody is there 100%. We are all learning as we go along. And exactly like Jennifer just said, you know, you think you're doing the right thing, and then science turns around next week and tells you, oh, that's completely the wrong thing. So you can't get dispirited. You have to apply flexible thinking to the problem. And if you find out that what you were doing perhaps was sending you off down the wrong road, then be completely honest about it and say, you know, that's what we were doing. We've now changed direction. We've decided that, you know, actually we want to do something slightly different, do it in a mindful way, do it in an open way. And there are some great examples of companies, consumer brands, you know, people like Oatly, the people who make oat milk, who do this really great storytelling around their product of real honesty, of saying they had a great sustainability report that on the cover just had a big headline saying, what did it say? It said, not as good as last year, but still okay. You know, and I just thought that was such a great headline, because you just go, I kind of feel like I don't need to read it now because I know that you're on it, you know, and that you're being honest with me. So, yeah. Yes.
So I guess, Jennifer or the Nicolas, you know, can you relate to what Nicola's saying and that idea of narrowing down to high impact areas and how you've all worked with your businesses?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I can read. Oh, after you guys, after you.
No, I was just going to say, we're exactly the same in the sense that we're trying and we're learning, and this is all a journey for us as much as it is our clients and other people in the industry. So you know, we're taking little steps, and we're, a lot of it is just learning ourselves and asking those questions and doing that extra research to feel more equipped and up to speed, because things are changing the whole time. There's new amazing innovative materials and producers and different ways of doing things which are a lot more environmentally friendly. And so yeah, for us it's a constant learning curve, and we're definitely on that journey. But I think for us the best thing and what we're striving to become is an environment where everyone would be taking sustainability in their processes as a standard. And so you don't have to then be asking these questions. It's just a kind of taken that yes, you would have done all these things that you can do to be as sustainable as possible in your production.
Yeah, it's part of, essentially, we see it very much as it's everyone's responsibility, sustainability. It's not a separate subject, it's just, it's about responsibility. So we're responsible as designers, suppliers are responsible, manufacturers are responsible, everybody, the part of the project team is. And I think, so essentially we shouldn't be talking about sustainability, it just becomes part of the norm of what we would all do. And I think our biggest tip for anyone starting out is just kind of get started. It can seem like a big hurdle and a big leap, but actually if you just tackle one thing and start with something first, it might be that you just look at waste and what maybe how you could repurpose that or what to do with it to ensure it doesn't end up in landfill. Or you might start looking at, say for example, the materials you're specifying or the fabrics, and actually start reading the labels. It's like food labels, you know, ask what does all that mean, and that's when you can have conversations with your suppliers. And if not everything is listed on the material, go to the website or go to the supplier and again ask that question, because when more and more people start asking, they then give more information. So I think it's that sort of chain reaction. But yeah, just start with one thing.
I think for us, you know, we consider ourselves at a luxury end of the market, and how luxury things and how sustainable companies think have often not been in alliance. And I think so it's things like, look, this is our amazing, wonderful repurposed, you know, recycled plastic rugs, but then where all of a sudden that we can't send that sample out in a plastic bag, and we have to look at, you know, the brochure, these, you know, nice glossy high end. Well, you know, it's about actually shifting what luxury is, and within the framework of sustainability. And I think that's kind of been an interesting process for us. It's not just oh look, we have this amazing product and we think it's great. It's asking ourselves the questions and slowly realizing, wait a second, that makes no sense. How could, you know, and it is a bit of a journey of a discovery. And you know, I think what's most impressive is that it does start affecting the decisions you make personally in your own lives as you go along. And you know, everyone who works for me now, we're all vegan, you know. It's just things like that. You just kind of, when you start discovering what is at stake, you have to face it, you know, looking straight at it. And that's, you know, that's what I think is makes it a beautiful journey for a business and trying to create, you know, luxury sustainable rugs, but also personally. And I think there's a lot of hope, and when I think people get into it, they enjoy it. And it is again about asking questions. You know, we put things on Instagram and people say, well, you know, is it sustainable, and is it really, and what happens to the plastic? And my initial reaction is, do you know what, thank you for asking the question, because we will go and, you know, is it, well what, you know, when it does have the end of its life, where can it go? And it is asking those questions and having those conversations, because I think as you know, someone said, nobody is 100%, and we're all trying, essentially.
Yeah, and absolutely. And just tapping into that idea that you mentioned about this being a journey, which I think is very true. Georgia, maybe to round things off, I was going to ask you really, what's the next big area for growth for wellbeing and sustainability? What's the current area of growth, or what do you see we should be all looking at next in design?
Well, I have two, so because I'm going first. But I'll only mention, rather than try and steal everyone else's thunder, the two things that I think are really, really important: circular economy. So circularity is so important. And then the second thing is indoor air quality. So those are two things I'm really focusing on in my work at the moment. The indoor air quality in particular, I think particularly coming out of the pandemic now, there's so much more awareness about the air that we breathe every day, you know, and the fact that the way that we live our lives, the way industry works, transport, everything around us, and also the products that we're bringing into our space can really profoundly have an impact on our health. So we're doing a lot of work around the various different ways of reducing toxins in the indoor environment, and then also monitoring, you know, putting in low-cost sensors that are really robust and looking at that data and seeing how we can influence behavior, and also feedback on the design and feedback on the ways in which the design of that space influences the long-term operation of it and how healthy it is as a space. So that indoor air quality, I would say, for me, is a really massive area for people to start thinking about. And, you know, things like flame retardants and off-gassing of blown foams, and there's just so much. It's not just the paints that you put on the wall and the solvents and things from those, it's the furniture, the coatings.
Absolutely. And what about for you with box design?
So for us, I'm actually going to sneak in 4 if that's okay, but just to expand slightly. So we're absolutely in agreement with Georgia, very much so. So for us, sustainability is actually where the true innovation in design is right now. Because of COVID, there's very much a focus on well-being. I think very much more over and above sustainability at the moment, but we see these things as not siloed. We don't see well-being as separate from sustainability. We see it very much as part of a holistic whole. Going back to our ethos of everything has to be good for people and good for the planet, it doesn't make sense that it's good for one and not for another, because they're neither are sustainable, they can't sustain each other. So well-being is very much the focus. Obviously looking at moving things, you know, beyond sustainability and having that circularity and the circular economy is where things are headed, which is another big leap and step. But also for us, it's about the connection to nature and how that then plays into the sustainability side and well-being. So with our designs, we look at the biophilic aspect and biomimicry and how we can really bring nature into the environment and also learn from nature's processes and the shapes and the forms, and how we can really utilize that to benefit all of the design. And then the other thing for us is technology, and really how technology can then help all of this. So yeah, that's our sort of our 4 things.
Fantastic. Anything to add, Jennifer?
I think for us, we are continue to focus on transparency. I think that's so crucial, and that idea of provenance and where things are actually coming from and what are the processes, and making sure we understand them. And as we continue to develop our recycled plastic repurposed line, I think it's what we've discovered also is that it's not just a sustainable product. It actually comes with huge performance benefits, and so it's exciting to think that something that is sustainable can be thought of as something other than just sustainable also. So it's high performance and commercial graded, and the idea that one rug can take 10,000 recycled plastic bottles, and obviously it's a massive problem, but it's about keeping it transparent and just making those moves in the right direction.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Thank you everybody on the panel today. It was really fantastic to talk to you. And if there are any other questions, or do we think we've come to an actual end, I guess?
What about you, Sam? What do you think is the key thing in sustainability?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm not the expert. Journalists always ask the questions. That's our role. So
Sorry, put you on the spot.
I don't think anyone wants to hear from me. But, I think what's great is to be able to open up to the debate to people who do have the knowledge and who are within the industry. And it's very sweet of you to ask. But I think it's been a great discussion, and that you've covered a lot of fantastic points. So yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. So thank you ever so much, everybody who's been listening in, and to our panel, of course. We're now going to invite questions for Jennifer and Nicola from Boxx Creative, Jennifer of Jennifer Manners, of course. So I've already had some great questions from the audience. Thank you so much for those. I'm going to kick off with one that's come through from Boxx Creative. Nicola, the question is, you talk about waste through reuse and repurposing. Do you have an example of a project where you've done this successfully?
Yes, actually one of the examples is actually from one of our hospitality projects. It was a restaurant, and we worked with the builder that was very open to looking at all the waste. So we started the discussions early, and they were literally able to use as much as they possibly could. So there was an old bar where drinks were served, and that wood was completely reused. It was used for packing, it was used for filling, it was used for all parts of the build. So instead of buying like a new timber and using any sort of rough cuts, they used that first and foremost. So it was a really good use of the waste. In residential, we used obviously any flooring and things like that. In residential, a good way to start is if a flooring needs to be replaced, let's say it's a wooden floor. We've sold them on eBay before, we've also bought them on eBay. There's lots of people buying and selling reclaimed tiles if they're really nice, like Victorian tiles or any sort of heritage type tile. There's a market for that. Kitchens are another really good one. You've got the secondhand kitchen exchange, and if you Google secondhand kitchens, there's a lot of companies that are actually either selling them from showrooms or they're used kitchens and next display and things like that. Gumtree, FreeCycle, eBay are all really good for reselling kitchens and bathrooms. But crucially, if you are ripping out any sort of waste and it's things that can't be either repurposed and reupholstered or reused in your design, or it can't be resold or given away to charity, then a great thing to do is actually working with your builder and ensuring that the skip company they're using has the proper recycling, and they'll be able to give you the certificates to show how much is being recycled and where it'll go. So for example, it's making sure all of the bathrooms, the ceramics, all actually go to be ceramically recycled for the ceramics. So it really is just having that conversation at the start of the project and really working collaboratively with the client and the builder, because sometimes the client might be busy, they might not have time to sell things, and they might actually want you to do that as part of your work for them. So yeah, it's just having those conversations.
That's great, thank you. And a question that's come in that follows on from that quite nicely is Maria Chandler, an interior designer, has kindly written in, and she's saying, as an independent designer, it's overwhelming to want to provide sustainable interiors, but perhaps not have the time to do so much research into that area. So she is wondering, Jennifer and Nicola, if there is a trusted source to find pre-researched products or suppliers. Have you come across anything like that?
Nicola, maybe. I mean, we look at different bodies for kind of getting certified and who's kind of setting up. And at the moment, we haven't seen anything for recycled plastic, but constantly on the lookout. I know there's all sorts of programs. There's, you know, we looked at doing a course at Cambridge on sustainable business, and you know, I think that I know the BID was also looking at doing some qualifications for sustainability. So, but I don't have a source yet.
Yeah, I think it's quite difficult at the moment. There isn't like a one go-to source. When we started the journey of research, we found that you go down one path and it leads you to another. So it really is just kind of starting. So Design are absolutely fantastic. Reading Design magazine, they cover, the big focus of theirs is actually covering sustainability and the environment. So they're always featuring new products, new materials, new innovations within the industry. So we really rely on that as a really good source of information. On Instagram, you've got, there's green designs and various other sustainable accounts that are actually posting about, again, new suppliers, new materials. So that's been a really good start. And then some of the sort of more sort of like cradle to cradle, so like the industry sort of standards or associations, that's been a really good start of looking at what materials are certified. So I think from there you kind of lead on, and then you obviously got Ellen MacArthur with Circular Foundation. So they've been really good starting points, but also another good way is actually looking at manufacturers that are sustainable. There's a lot you can learn for them, and they share huge amounts of resources because it really is embedded in their company ethos.
So Chimera fabrics are absolutely fantastic. They've got a huge amount of resources explaining the differences between different types of materials, the water consumption, the energy usage, what bast fibres are, a lot of people still don't know, how they differ from, say, cotton or wool in terms of the environmental footprint. And they have a huge amount of information, so I definitely recommend people to start there. Interface is a flooring company, traditionally more in commercial, but we still actually use them on residential. They're absolutely fantastic. And again, the videos, the body of information is terrific. So I think once you start looking at sustainable suppliers, you'll find there's a lot of information on their websites as well, which is really, really helpful. And also just speaking to your reps, those companies that care about this, they love the opportunity to meet you, speak with you over the phone, and really help educate you. So for us, having those sort of interactive meetings has been really good to understand what questions to ask, how to delve deeper, and really how to understand it and what you need to know in order to have a really well-rounded opinion about these things.
Thank you, Nicola. And following on from that is a question from Flavio Dell'Aquila. Hope I've said that right, Flavio, who is a design architect. And he asks, do we think that a stronger support from governments in imposing use of certain materials or technologies would do the job? And I wondered if you wanted to pick that up, Jennifer, with regards to plastics, maybe in the first instance, and we can open it to both of you.
Absolutely, feel extremely passionately about banning single-use plastic. It's always been bad, and it seems to be increasing. And now I think under the kind of environment of COVID-19, I think what people are now using are throwaway plastic even more. I've seen that where all of a sudden they go into a restaurant and they're giving you plastic knives and forks in plastic bags, and even on flying in British Airways, giving you plastic bags in order to put it, and it cools my soul to see just this increase. It felt like we should be kind of going the other way with eliminating single-use plastic that isn't completely necessary. Plastic is such a vital material for a lot of things in the medical field, but there's the use of the single-use plastic and the throwaway. It's nonsensical. Absolutely, government should be behind that 1,000%.
Yeah, Nicola, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is really, for example, bioplastics. It's a great initiative, but they can't be recycled currently. I think there might be one recycling plant from the research I did last year, so they contaminate our normal recycling chains. And it's still so much research. If they are properly compostable within the right microbiome environment, are they actually changing the soil pH? So I think there's a lot more research that needs to go into these things. But it's like we need recycling also for the bioplastics. That could be one of the good solutions. So I think it's really making sure that we have the recycling facilities, we can reuse these materials, and they ultimately avoid waste, landfill and incineration, and they stay in that chain. And I think it's not only support from government, but it's also just people changing their attitudes, people valuing material in its source and ensuring that it doesn't end up in simply waste. So I think it's a mixture of government, it's people, it's us all pulling together to really make a difference.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we've got about a minute remaining of time, so I think it would be very difficult to squeeze in any other questions, but there's probably just time to thank you both so much for your input and your ideas and your inspiration for everybody listening in today.
Thank you. Fantastic to be having the discussion.